Hey everybody, welcome to day 26 of the Take Back Your Life video journey. 40 days of thinking right so that we can live right.
Very good. Right there, you did it. Half of a second stutter.
Well, I almost forgot what day it was.
Yeah, you've been busy
I had to
today.
look down just to be sure. There's a lot of marks on the page.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, today was a long day, but that's okay. It's good. I enjoyed it.
I just want to know, I didn't ask you earlier, were you warm or were you cold?
I was pretty warm.
Okay.
The strike was cold because it's all outside.
Yeah.
So we had to spend some time outside. It's not bad. You know, once you get used to it, then you're okay. For me, it takes about, 10 minutes or so, and then I'm okay.
You got to tell the people what you're talking about. And
Talking about being,
TV
being
production.
outside.
TV production, setting all the wires up, making the things work, right?
Yeah. Setting up all the wires.
Yeah. It's crazy the amount of wires.
It's even funnier to listen to my wife talk about setting up the wires.
I just think it's funny because I think of just a ball, instead of yarn, a ball of wires. Want to just give it to him and see his head go, ah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never really thought of it that way.
Well, because you've always got the wires that they're, going where they're supposed to go. But it would be fun to just hand you a big bundle of wires and make you use what you have.
Yeah. That's a fairly good analogy. You sort of learn to use what you have, and sometimes you have an abundance and sometimes you don't. But
sometimes you just can't get it worked out.
You always get it worked out.
Yeah.
I mean, so I think that's sort of the charge of doing live television is you get it worked out one way or another. I mean, there's no way to not get it worked out. I mean, yeah. So you have to get on the air one way or another. But you have a roadmap and you're able to figure out what goes where. If somebody was to take a look at all of the mess, like you were saying, without knowing what it is or what goes where, it can be very confusing.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway.
Make you curl up in the fetal position and cry.
Yeah, sometimes. Today we're going to talk about using what you've got. The verse for today, 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 3 says, His divine power has given to us all things that pertain to life and godliness through knowledge of Him who called us by glory and virtue. That's sort of a long, tongue-twisting type of a verse.
Mm-hmm.
But what it speaks to is that God's given us everything that we need to be successful in this life, to live out the calling that He's placed on us.
Mm-hmm. And He completed it whenever He sent Jesus down.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
It's one of those things that you try to teach your kids. I mean, there's a whole bunch of stuff in this book so far that I've related to having kids.
Mm-hmm.
Kids are always going, hey, let's go get this, or hey, let's go get that. Let's do this new thing or whatever. But you're like, hey, just use what you have. You've got everything you need right here. And then they're like, I don't want to. I want new. And you're like, yeah, no, just use what you have.
That's a great analogy too.
Whenever you have kids in that situation, it's not that new and exciting isn't fun, but it also doesn't teach them how to be resourceful. And I think as Christians, sometimes we are not resourceful because we're just too busy letting other things get in the way.
Well, and a lot of times new is easy. If you have to do with what you have, it's hard. And doing hard things is uncomfortable. We don't like it. So learning to do hard things is good for you no matter what your age is.
So what does it mean to use what we have?
Well, I mean, it depends on the situation. If we are in a situation where we just absolutely have no idea what God wants us to get out of it, I mean, using what we have is literally in here talks about that we're in Christ. So when God looks at us, he sees Christ, and then we're inside covered by Christ. And so we have that all-powerful ability to go, God, what is it that you want me to do here? And to seek that knowledge, the wisdom. He's very specific that if you ask for wisdom, he's going to give you wisdom. And that is using what we have, is we have Jesus and we have the ability to ask for wisdom.
He uses the analogy of having a gym membership and then not using the gym membership. You have it, you have the card in your wallet or whatever, however you access your gym, but that doesn't mean that you're ultimately going to end up with six-pack abs. The only way to end up with six-pack abs is to go to the gym every day and use the membership. And one of the things we don't seem to do is to use that relationship that we have with God in order to help us see more clearly what it is that he wants us to do. It also blocks us from being able to rely on him, as we'll get into in just a minute. But it says the power that leads to victory is not in us or from us. It is with God and comes from his hand. But that same power has to be wielded. Having it and using it are two completely different things. And so we often have God's power, but we don't use it. And there's a couple of reasons why that he talks about in here. One of the things that he talks about is if we have strongholds of sin or strongholds of areas in our lives that we have been unwilling to give to God, it blocks the power.
And I like where he actually lists out the different areas where he's talking about the pride, anxiety, lust, resentment, jealousy, bitterness, condemnation, shame, physical abuse, substance abuse, addictions, jealousy, and covetousness. Those are all things that we don't even necessarily realize. We talk about it in the Bible too, where it says that you're so busy pointing out a speck in somebody else's eye, you don't realize that there's a plank in your eye. And whenever we are stuck in any of those areas, we are not able to use the power of God because God and that sin cannot coexist. So whenever we're talking about wielding that power and things are not moving, because back a little bit further, it says, our continued reliance on Jesus, we're able to tap into the arsenal of protection, ammunition, and navigation. And so if we're not seeing that protection, ammunition, and navigation, we need to start looking at what those strongholds are. And one of the things that he talks about today is having a squad, which I love that he uses the term squad because we have always, since we've been married, called our family the Todd Squad. Having that squad that is able to say, hey, you're having a problem with pride right now. You are, prideful on this. You need to take that to God. You're having a problem with anxiety. Whatever that issue is, we're able to address it. And sometimes it's Rockford and I that have to address it with the kids. Sometimes the kids address it with each other. Sometimes it'll end up being Rockford addressing it with me or me with him.
Yep. And it was funny, whenever I saw this list, I was like, I can identify with a bunch of those.
Mm-hmm.
He gives us, again, some more tools. We've talked about tools several times so far in this study, but he gives us 5 more tools today and how to deal with our strongholds. First of all, he says to spot the strongholds. So if you haven't identified the areas that are maybe blocking you from experiencing a close relationship with God, then you might want to take some more looking, take another look into your blind spot.
And specifically, he says, ask God to show it to you.
Renounce the thinking or behavior and set your soul against it. So, as an example, if it's pride, then you need to change your behavior and set your soul against being prideful. Third is paint the target so that heaven can blast it with God's supernatural power. He takes it to a military term with that one, which I thought was pretty cool. Number 4, let your squad in on what's been going on. So again, like April was mentioning, get with those people that are closest to you, your inner circle, and talk to them about the way that you see yourself and the way that these strongholds maybe are affecting you. And then vigilantly and diligently build something in place of that particular stronghold. Because as we've talked about in our study before today, we know that you can't just give up thinking a certain way. You have to replace that thought. So you have to be willing to build something else in the place of your stronghold.
And you have to be willing to do that, because if you don't, if you cut it out and then you just leave that void there, your natural sin nature is going to go back to fill it up with that same style of sin. And it typically ends up being more severe than the previous time. So whenever we're talking about fill it with something different, this is where like praying and fasting comes in. And whenever you're doing a fast, you're not just fasting from whatever it is that you're fasting from. Maybe it's social media, maybe it is food, maybe it is the TV. Whenever you would be doing that area of things, that's whenever you pray. So it's the same thing. You're substituting that behavior for time with God, having him to help you to see what it is that he's wanting you to see. Now, if you're replacing some type of a sin, then you need to, probably that's where it's talking about engage your squad in putting something else in there. So like if you are addicted to something, maybe cigarettes, and you go to smoke in your car every time that you go driving, you have to decide, what am I going to do different? And then make sure that you have whatever it is. If it's chewing gum, you're going to chew gum on your way. Make sure that you always have gum in the car. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
That's replacing it. Being proactive, having a plan.
Then the last thing that we want to make sure that we're doing is that we're praying. Just like April was saying, we want to make sure that we are praying, because having that relationship with God opens up the floodgates and quote unquote paints the target so that God can blast the enemy and remove those things. But it requires us to make sure that we are being diligent in our prayer life. It said in there, oh no, I'm going to have to find it. Oh no, there it is. It says, as the old hymn put it, Satan trembles when he sees the weakest saint upon his knees. So you want to strike fear into the devil? Start praying. So anyway, all right, everybody, that's day 26. And that puts us one step closer towards our 40-day goal and gets us one day closer to the end of 2020. I hope that by now you are beginning to get more and more mentally prepared for the new year. I know that all of us are sort of ready to see 2020 in the rearview mirror. It's been a crazy year. But I want to make sure and remind you that you should be thinking about your word, praying about your word for 2021. Something that God can give you that will help you to see things differently as we step into the new year. So keep that in mind. We'll be back tomorrow.
On day 27, we're in the last 2 weeks of 2020. Yay!
We are getting so close to Christmas and New Year's. It's exciting. So tomorrow's day 27. We'll be back then. I hope you guys have an amazing day. Don't forget to ding the bell or subscribe to the channel or hit the like button or whatever it is that makes YouTube like us. That's what we got to do. So you guys have an amazing day. We'll see you tomorrow.